Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It is time for another edition of This Week in the ACCC. And yes, things continue to be very busy. Basketball, baseball, softball. We're going to talk about it all on This Week in the ACCC. And it starts right after this. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in the ACCC. I'm Robert Williamson. Let's get right into scores and start with ladies basketball. A Jasmine Whitfield scored 19 points on Thursday as Faulkner State defeated Wallace Community College from Selma 70-63, the final. Shelton State, continuing their winning ways, got 48 points and had 4 double-digit scores from their bench en route to an 81-74 win over Snead State. Aaliyah Bell with 14. Valencia Johnson had 13. Chat Valley doesn't often have double-digit scores, but they had a pair in Thursday's win over Alabama Southern, 67-60. The final big win for Chat Valley. It secures the top spot in the South Division of the ACCC. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Enterprise State Community College holding LBW to 2 points in the second stanza en route to a 3-point win, 50-47 over the Lady Saints. Lawson State got 19 points, but that wasn't it for Kenesha Coulson. She also had 13 rebounds, had 5 assists, 4 steals, 3 blocks. Big night for Coulson. And then you toss in the fact that Canisius, Mayfield, and Fredericks were all productive as well with double-doubles, and you got a win for Lawson State, 67-60 over Southern. Chat Valley, now they got the win on Thursday to guarantee themselves the top spot in the South Division of the ACCC, but then picked up another win on Saturday, had 5 double-digit scores that day. What's up with the Lady Pirates? You know, it's usually typically balanced and not many people in double-digit scoring. They had 5 on Saturday in a 95-59 win over Southern University. Well, let's take a look at those standings for the ladies. First of all, the North, where it's pretty much set. Shelton State, unbeaten. They will be the number 1 seed no matter what happens in the last game of the regular season. Meanwhile, Lawson State and Wallace State, hands full, both with 3 losses. They have split during the course of the regular season. So who knows who will get that top spot? I mean, the number 2 spot. Obviously, the 1 and 2 spot significant, though, because if you get one or the other, then you get a first-round bye in the state tournament next week. Meanwhile, checking out the South, we know who's going to be 1, and we know who's going to be 2. Chat Valley will be the number 1 seed coming out of the South. Meanwhile, Alabama Southern will be the number 2 seed. That means both get first-round byes and don't have to play basketball until I think it is on Wednesday in the state tournament there in Birmingham at Lawson State. What about men's basketball? Well, Bishop State, big win over Jefferson Davis. They have solidified their hold on that number 2 spot in the South Division of the ACCC. Wallace Community College at Selma, a 93-69 win over Faulkner State. Carlos Bell had 14 as MMI defeated Wallace State at Hansville, 62-40. Traquan Knight, big night, 25 points, and Kevin Murph had a double-double as Shelton State won their 6th in a row, beating Snead State 77-62. LBW shot 56% from the floor, 58% from behind the arc by defeating Enterprise State 74-72. In overtime, Khalil Spearman, who had 32 the last time Alabama Southern played Chat Valley, had 35 on Thursday night in the ACCC Game of the Week. It was an overtime victory, but it was a win nonetheless that solidifies the Eagles as the number 1 seed in the South. They beat Chat Valley by a final of 94-91. And Lawson State, a 92-86 winner over Southern Union. Melton, Lee, and Johnson, all with 20-plus points, and Kevin Cheatham had a double-double en route to that Lawson State win. What about the standings for the men in the ACCC? Well, in the North, you've got kind of a quagmire, but we do know who will be 1 and 2. We just don't know specifically whether they will be 1 or 2. Both will get first-round byes. That's Shelton State and Lawson State. They have split during the course of the regular season. Shelton State's got Gadsden State tonight. Lawson State's got MMI. If both win or both lose, then we got to go to a tiebreaker scenario. But they are both in as getting byes in the first round in the state tournament next week. In the South, it's cut and dry. Alabama Southern is the number 1 team in the South. Bishop State will be the number 2 team, no matter what happens on the last day of the regular season. So the Eagles are 1, and Bishop State will be 2 in the South. Why don't we take a quick look before we head into the break and then get into baseball and softball at the NJCAA basketball standings, and start with the ladies, because actually there is one team from one school in the ACCC in both the men's and the ladies' polls. In ladies basketball, back where they belong. Wasn't that an old Jennifer Warren song? But Shelton State, they're back into the top 10. They are now the number 8 squad in the nation in NJCAA ladies basketball. They are the only ACCC team in the ladies' polls. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the guys' polls, and there again, you're going to find a Shelton State squad, and you are again going to find them back in the polls. Shelton State had dropped out after losses to MMI and Gadsden State. They are back into the polls now at that number 22 spot with that pretty good-looking 22-5 record and that 6-game winning streak. Well, let's take a break and come back with another sport, softball, and how about another one, baseball too. It's all when we return to This Week in the ACCC. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in the ACCC. I've mentioned previously we're at that blending of sports. Basketball moving into its final part of the regular season, and baseball and softball just beginning. Let's talk a little softball. Savannah Rowell, a freshman pitcher for the Lady Sun Chiefs of Coastal Alabama, named the ACCC Pitcher of the Week. The Pensacola native finished with a 2-0 mark last week, had 18 strikeouts, including 10 against Pearl River Community College. Savannah surrendered just 6 walks en route to an ERA of .47. While we're talking about softball, conference play hasn't begun. It's all out-of-conference play for ACCC teams, and they're not faring really well as far as out-of-conference goes, but that's obviously irrelevant when it comes to the possibilities of postseason. But you got a couple of teams, one in the north, one in the south, that's playing some pretty good softball. Shelton State have won 5 in a row. They are 11-3 overall. Wallace Dothan in the south has won 4 straight. They are now 14-5. Everybody else, though, is right about or below the 500 mark in softball in out-of-conference play. Turning to the world of baseball, Chase Shell, a freshman right-handed pitcher for Alabama Southern, has been named the ACCC Baseball Pitcher of the Week. Chase is a graduate of Milton High. You might recall Milton High is part of that district that also had Jim Presley, who went to the majors and fared well. Jay Bell played for the Pirates. They all came out of that same district that Milton plays in. Got some more talent, obviously, in Chase. Pitched 5 scoreless innings, not just against anybody, but against Northwest Florida State, allowing just 2 hits, 2 walks, striking out 9, finished with a bunch of goose eggs on the ERA, and that's exactly what you want. You know, we were talking just a few moments ago about the fact that In softball in the ACCC, a little struggle with out-of-conference play. Not necessarily so with baseball. Of the 17 teams, better than half, 9, are above the 500 mark. So playing some pretty good out-of-conference baseball. Best is probably Wallace-Hansville. They are currently 16-3. You've got a Chat Valley squad that is 12-2. LBW is 10-2. Wallace-Dothan 11-2-1, and Wallace-Selma at 12-3-1. So some pretty good starts for some ACCC baseball squads. No need to take a look at the NJCAA baseball polls because they haven't changed since January 23rd. That's when the preseason polls came out. We're expecting a change shortly. We should get some polls with now some records. Everybody hadn't played at that time. They have now. But when those polls came out, when those preseason polls were out, Chat Valley was 6, Shelton State was 18. We'll see how both of those teams look when the new polls come out. Maybe there's a new ACCC team finding their way into the top 20 in those baseball polls. That's baseball and softball for you. Let's return with a look at this week's Game of the Week and what we always do in wrapping up, inviting you to follow us on social media. It all happens after the break on This Week in the ACCC. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the final segment of This Week in the ACCC. Chances are you are watching this at halftime of either the ladies or the men's game of Bishop State taking on Faulkner State. It's the last game of the week in the regular season part of the basketball schedule on the ACCC Sports Network. If you're not, then you're watching it on YouTube. Regardless, thank you very much for watching. But things are pretty much solidified in the South, so this game is not going to have any ramifications on who gets byes, and really not much bearing on the seeding process. But we got it for you, and it's going to be a good one. And speaking of good ones, next week we will head off to Lawson State, Birmingham, Alabama, and that's where the state tournament gets underway on Tuesday. And, of course, you can get all the live coverage right here on the ACCC Sports Network. Let me, before I go, remind you that we would love to have you as a friend on Facebook, a follower on Twitter. Why? Well, because we keep you posted on everything we do, scores, schedules, and so much more. And by the way, we do some stuff outside of the ACCC that you might be interested in. A lot of junior college stuff. Not just the ACCC, the GCAA, the TCCAA. So if it's JUCO, you're going to want to come to JockJive. And you can check out more and get specifics on Facebook and Twitter. And might as well subscribe to our YouTube channel while you are at it. Thanks so much for watching This Week in the ACCC. It's been great to have you aboard. James Crenshaw has been producing. I'm Robert Williamson. We will see you next time for This Week.